everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kayla and it's time to crack into a good book. So today's video is going to be another one of these urban fantasy and paranormal romance recommendations videos where the theme for this group of books is all about Seers. So I'll be talking about 4 different book series here, and 2 of them, the Seers, are more like they can see through fae glamour, and then the other 2 are like actually predicting the future. First, I don't know what the lighting is going to look like. It's super cloudy and rainy today, so you know, we just have to deal, so hopefully it's not too bad. The first series that I'll talk about today is the Cassandra Palmer series, and this is by Karen Chance. So the first book is Touch the Dark, and this one is kind of one that's like, I guess, lower on my recommendations. Like, of the books that I'm going to talk about today, this is definitely like my least favorite among them. So this recommendation kind of comes with a caveat. Like, I enjoyed the first 5 or so books in it, and then it took like a serious nosedive in quality. So this is like, I guess, kind of like a partial recommendation just to like bring your awareness to it in case it does sound interesting to you. And I'll get to why I didn't like, I think it was the 6th book in the series. So Cassandra Palmer, the main character, can see the future. And I believe there was some sort of element that she was like an oracle or something like that, which, I mean, makes sense if she's seeing the future. But anyway, she can also talk to spirits. This series also has a lot to do with vampires. So in the first book, Touch the Dark, there's a vampire who is, you know, going after Cassie, and she escaped from him 3 years ago. And so she ends up turning to the vampire senate for protection. The senators obviously are like, well, you know, give us a little something and we'll help you out. So basically she ends up having to work with one of these vampires. This gets into like a whole thing throughout the series with this particular vampire. Like, he's one of the master vampires, and they kind of end up having some feelings for each other. So the first book I did rate 4 out of 5 stars. Books 2 through 5 I've rated either 3 or 4 stars, and then, like I said, book 6, I rated 1 star. So Cassie ends up also like being able to travel through time, and so that was kind of like an interesting component, I guess. So we've got vampires, I seem to remember demons. A lot of, I think, these books deal with like, she has to get help from this master vampire, and he like wants to protect her, and then there's some kind of possibly not great power dynamics happening here. Like, this is one I read a while ago, so I don't fully remember, but given how I'm reading the synopses of these books, and it's like, you know, I seem to recall that there's, you know, possibly some strange power dynamics, so just be aware of that. We do have some Greek gods involved at some points throughout the books as well. So the master vampire who ends up, you know, being involved in a lot of this, I think is like Dracula's brother, from what I remember, something like that. Some like actual historical figures, and so there's definitely like a lot going on in these books. So yeah, this is a decent series, and so why I didn't like book 6 was that I felt like we didn't really get a full resolution in it, and there were, like, actually reading the book, I was like, what is actually going on? I seem to remember being extremely confused, and it felt like we basically ended up in the same place as we started, so I was like, this really didn't add anything to the story and like didn't advance the story. So I kind of stopped reading after that point, so I don't know if it's improved, but this is, you know, this is like a tentative, I guess, recommendation for the series. Like, books 1 through 5 were enjoyable enough. So now we'll talk about a new series, and this is one of the series where it involves like seeing through glamour. So this is the Fever series by Karen Marie Moning. Now, I know that this is perhaps like not the highest quality literature, but I do really remember having a good time with it. Like, I think it's kind of light reading, I guess. It's very easy to binge through these books. Like, there's also quite a bit of smut from what I remember. So our main character, Michaela, or Mac for short, can basically like see these fae creatures, and I think see through glamour. So her sister ends up being murdered, and so Mac ends up going to Ireland to figure out what happened to her and like solve this mystery. She finds out that she is in fact like this, she can see through fae glamour and like actually see the fae. So obviously this has a lot to do with the fae. Mac ends up like trying to find this magic book. I think the boundary between the human world and the fae world is beginning to crumble, and so she needs to find this book because whoever would get it first would control both of these worlds. So obviously we have things like fae, we have vampires, I think. We have like this magic book situation. So it looks like I've read books 1 through 6, and like books 1 through 5 are the main series, and then there was like a spin-off series following one of the like side characters from the main series, and then so I read the first one of that and like really didn't like it, so that I kind of stopped reading there. But I think she's gotten back to like books that deal with Michaela as the main character. But for books 1 through 5, I did rate them 5 stars, evidently, and then book 6 is a 2-star for me. So I think these all mostly take place in Dublin, and most of these books do deal a lot with this particular book that they're after. So if you don't want to read a book that has a lot of smut in it, do not read this series, because it is just like rampant through all of these, and even just reading the descriptions on Goodreads, like you can kind of tell what kind of books they're going to be. But anyway, I remember really liking them. They're fast reads. I seem to remember liking the main character quite a bit. I like the fact that it took place in Ireland. I thought that was really neat. So book 6, we follow one of the, like I mentioned, one of the side characters from the original series, and I just really disliked her. So this was Danny, I think, and I seem to remember feeling like super irritated with her, and she just was really obnoxious and just like grating to read as a main character. So I definitely didn't like that, and she felt like she was really full of herself and just, I don't know, not enjoyable to read. So I stopped reading there. But I don't know how the rest of the series is. So I guess like these first 2 series are kind of like, you know, recommendations with some warnings. Like they're not going to be for everybody, and there was, for both cases, like a significant decline in quality, at least for me. So these final 2 series are ones that like I do really like, and I've read all of the available books and have loved them. So like these are definitely the 2 higher quality series in this particular video for me. So the next series that I'll talk about is the Others series by Anne Bishop, and the first book is written in red. So this, I think, kind of comes with content warnings, I guess, because like the seers in this world have to like cut themselves in order to see the future. Our main character, Meg, is a blood prophet, so whenever somebody like cuts her skin, she can see the future, and there's like a lot of, I guess, to go along with the content warnings here, like we end up finding out like these blood prophets, like it's kind of, every time they're cut, it kind of gives them like a euphoric feeling. So a lot of these blood prophets are kept under close control because they, like, their keepers essentially sell their services for a very high amount. So Meg, the main character, ends up escaping from her controller, and she ends up like fleeing to the lakeside courtyard. And so this is kind of post-apocalyptic-ish, I guess. So we've got like a world very much like our own, but it's more controlled by the others. So these are a lot of like, you know, shifters, there's vampires, like personifications of like wind and tornadoes and fire and things like that. So we see a variety of creatures in here. So Meg flees to this lakeside courtyard, which is in control of the others, and she ends up like trying to get a job working for, as like a human liaison between the shifters and like the others in general and the humans and stuff. There's a lot of distrust between the others and the humans throughout this series. Like the others, there's definitely like some really high-powered monsters that just like destroy and eat people. So tensions are definitely high between humans and the others, and there's, throughout the books, we see a lot of humans trying to reclaim land, and generally like things don't go well for them. So Meg ends up getting this job, and the guy who hires her, Simon, is a shifter, and he's like a werewolf, and so he ends up like feeling pretty protective towards Meg, and then it kind of becomes, you know, he finds out that she is wanted by the government because she has escaped from, you know, being controlled as a blood prophet, and it kind of brings in a dynamic of, you know, do we protect her even though she's human, or do we give her up? So I really love this series. It is so fantastic. So far, I think there are 5 books following Meg, and then there are 2 spin-off books, but I've given all of these books either 4 or 5 stars, it looks like. Meg can see the future, and this comes into play quite a bit, and she like struggles to control her powers since these blood prophets have to like cut themselves in order to have these visions. There's a lot of discussion, I think, about addiction and dealing with something that like makes you feel good but really isn't all that great for you. But I like the dynamics in these books quite a bit. I really like Meg a lot, and I think watching her struggle to, escape and lead a normal life is really interesting. I really like all of the various shifters. We get a lot of fun characters, and I like seeing the relationship between Simon, who is this wolf guard, which is like the wolf shifter. I like seeing the dynamic between him and Meg develop over time, and it's nice to, I think it's cool to see how the others adapt to humans, and like, okay, maybe humans aren't all bad, but some of them are. So I don't know. It was really great. I really like the series, and I highly recommend it for sure. So the last book series that I'll talk about today is the SPI Files by Lisa Shearin. So I've talked about this before on my channel, but this is again we're going back to like one of these series where our main character can like see through fake glamour and see various fake creatures. The first book is The Grendel Affair, and this is a book series that involves a variety of supernatural creatures. So we have like werewolves, we have vampires, we have goblins, and they're not like the typical goblins, I guess. They're like attractive goblins. And then we've got dragons. So SPI stands for Supernatural Protection and Investigations, and they're kind of like a supernatural FBI. So this series is very much focused on like, we have to protect the secret of all of these supernatural creatures and like not let the wider world know that we exist. So our main character, McKenna, originally moved to New York to be a journalist for like, some of those tabloids that are like, oh, like Alien Baby, Bigfoot on the loose, whatever, all of those types of things. So she actually ends up becoming an undercover agent because of this job. And I seem to remember there's some discussion of like, she can pass off things that are actually happening as like, put it in a tabloid, like, is that really real? So she has to like track down creatures and, gets involved in cases where her skills are necessary. So in this first one, we've got a serial killer prowling through the subway tunnels, and this serial killer is Grendel, like, or is a descendant of Grendel, like Grendel from Beowulf. And it's like New Year's Eve in Times Square is only a few days away, so they need to find this Grendel and obviously like capture it before it goes and slaughters everybody at Times Square. So this is a very fun series. I think currently there are 6 books out, and it looks like I've given them all either 4 or 5 stars. I don't know when book 7 comes out. It's an ongoing series, but I do really love it and plan on continuing to read this. McKenna is very funny and just like a fantastic main character. She, I think, is like very relatable, I guess, and just a delight to read from her point of view. Seers are kind of rare because once creatures like learn that you can see through their glamour, they're obviously not super thrilled about that. So I seem to remember like a lot of seers end up dying. So working for the SPI, they obviously like very much want to protect her because she's a very important asset. But her partner Ian is very overprotective, I would say, and over the books, I think friendship develops very nicely, and I do like seeing that. And then we also have this really great friendship between McKenna and one of the werewolves on the team, and he's just really funny, the werewolf is. So some of the books are pitched kind of as like Men in Black sort of things, but I think it's more like lighthearted, I guess, than Men in Black. I don't know. But what's really cool is later, I think in maybe the most recent book, there's actually like a crossover between this particular urban fantasy series and Lisa Shearin's other like high fantasy series, and that was like super great. So I'd actually read that high fantasy series first, and seeing some of the characters come back from that, it was just really cool. Like, that's sort of the mashup that I wanted in my life. So those are the 4-book series about Seers that I have to talk to you about today. The first 2 series, like I mentioned, are kind of, come with a caveat. They're not going to be for everybody. There's definitely like a decline in quality, but the last 2 series I talk about are very good, and I highly recommend them. Obviously, there are some trigger warnings, perhaps, or content warnings with the other series, like I mentioned. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or think you might pick them up. For your question of the day, have you read any other books that deal with seers? Is this something that you enjoy seeing in a book? Ha, get it? See it? Ha. Okay, anyway. So, I hope you're having an excellent day and are reading something awesome. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, as that would certainly help me out. But with that, I think I'm going to wrap it up here and see you in the next one.